Good morning. I want to thank you for coming. My name is Jeff Humphrey. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of the Phoenix office. And we are making available people that have been involved in the capture of Macho B, the Jaguar that was captured southwest of Tucson here, to answer your questions and to just make themselves available to freely provide you information that a number of you have probably been seeking over the course of the last week and a half, 2 weeks. There will be a memorial service for the Jaguar. That has been called, it's not been called by the Fish and Wildlife Service, Arizona Game and Fish, or any of the people represented here. That's the Center for Biological Diversity has called for that. And after this, at noon, I believe, is when they will be starting. And Tucson Police Department has arranged for that memorial to be in the park just behind this building, between here and the Santa Cruz River. As I mentioned, today we have 4 people that are here available to answer your questions. What we'll do is we'll have each provide a statement, one after the other, and then if we could have you direct your questions to them, they'll return to the podium so that you can pick up the sound. The first person who will speak is Steve Spangle, who's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Field Supervisor for Arizona. Then we will have Bill Van Pelt. Bill Van Pelt is Arizona Game and Fish's Non-Game Birds and Mammals Program Manager in the CAP here. He was involved in the direction and participation in most of the field operations with the Jaguar here. Dr. Dean Rice, who's the Executive Vice President of the Phoenix Zoo, the veterinarian that performed the necropsy, an animal autopsy on the Jaguar. You were involved also in the initial treatment with the Jaguar as well. And then we'll have concluding remarks also by Bob Hermbro. Bob, to my immediate left here, is the Arizona Game and Fish Commission Chairman, so we're really pleased to have him here with us today as well. So if I could turn it over to Steve Spangle, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning and thanks for coming. Again, my name is Steve Spangle. I'm the field supervisor for Arizona Ecological Services Office, which is the branch of the Fish and Wildlife Service that oversees Endangered Species Act implementation in the state. So I'm just going to briefly describe the roles and responsibilities of the various folks up here and what we do, and then discuss a little bit about the incidents of last weekend. As I said, Fish and Wildlife Service oversees the federal implementation of the Endangered Species Act. My office oversees that statewide. Arizona Game and Fish Department is responsible for management of all fish and wildlife resources within the state. As such, we consider ourselves co-equals in implementation of the Endangered Species Act and management of threatened and endangered species and recovery of those species. The Phoenix Zoo has been a valuable partner in Arizona's endangered species program. They have provided captive breeding facilities and expertise, as well as emergency veterinary support. And successful conservation of Arizona's threatened and endangered species requires federal and state resources, as well as many other partners, both domestic and international. And I apologize for my broken glasses here. On a personal level, the recent incident involving Macho B was deflating. As an endangered species management professional, it was disappointing. We had hoped to learn a great deal from Macho B. For instance, how do jaguars utilize habitat at the edge of their range? This is the northern extremity of the jaguar range in the world. How much habitat do they need? How do they relate to and interact with the jaguars in Mexico? And how and where do jaguars cross the border? And how do they cross the valleys between the mountain ranges in which they've been detected? Questions like these really can only be answered through the use of radio telemetry. So for 10 years, we've been planning for the opportunity to capture and collar a jaguar in the U.S. so that we can get answers to these questions and so that we can manage for the jaguars that do occur here. Wildlife managers routinely capture, mark, and radio or satellite track animals to gain the information needed to inform management decisions. Whether capturing or handling birds, fish, or jaguars, we acknowledge that there are risks to individual animals. We weigh those risks against the benefit that can be acquired through research and that can then be used to provide benefits to the overall species. So we acknowledge the risk to individual animals, but we certainly support the need to get information to benefit the species as a whole. Our deliberations regarding capturing and monitoring a jaguar in Arizona included the development of a very thorough and conservative capture protocol. Ultimately, the Fish and Wildlife Service issued a permit for the capture of the jaguar. We will continue to look for jaguars in the borderland areas using motion sensor cameras. And when the right opportunity presents itself, we will again seek to collar and monitor a jaguar so we can get that vital information. We need to acquire this data to inform wise management decisions for jaguars. We staunchly believe that the Arizona Game and Fish Department properly implemented the jaguar capture protocol. We were and remain fully supportive of the department's extraordinary and diligent efforts, and I wish to commend the efforts of the Game and Fish Department and the Phoenix Zoo staff and look forward to our continued joint efforts to conserve jaguars. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Do you have any sound needs?
Yeah, I'm waiting from Jeff.
Yeah.
Are you all done?
No, we'll have another. Do you want a mic up here?
No, I'm good.
You're all good?
Just get
Okay.
after.
All right, Bill Van Pelt, please.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Bill Van Pelt, and I'm the Non-Game Birds and Mammals Program Manager with Arizona Game and Fish. Let me start by saying that we're all saddened, the entire conservation community, over the death of the jaguar known as Macho B. I've worked with wildlife conservation for 18 years with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and 13 of those years have been with Macho B being part of that. And while the loss of the jaguar is very disappointing, both from an emotional and a scientific level, as Steve articulated, we had hopes of unlocking some of those secrets that Macho B has kept for those 13 years and identifying those travel corridors that allowed him to go unseen for the most part by the general public for over 13, well, probably 16 years. So what we'd like to do today is try to lay out the events that led up to the capture, the monitoring, and the recapture, and an eventual diagnosis of Macho B. First off, I'd like to point out that the trapping effort that was underway was not in place to capture a jaguar. The trapping effort that was on the ground at that point in time was for mountain lion and bears. And what we were doing with that study or research project was to try to determine travel corridors that these large predators use. And as on February 18th, personnel going out checking in the snares, they discovered that they had captured a jaguar. And because of the awareness that a jaguar could be in southern Arizona, the Arizona Game and Fish Department took the appropriate steps to train their personnel in the event that a capture did occur. Personnel followed the handling protocol that was established by the Jaguar Conservation Team, and which was reviewed by the scientific advisory group to the Jaguar Conservation Team. That scientific advisory group is made up of jaguar experts and large carnivore researchers, including Alan Rabinowitz, Howard Quigley, and Brian Miller. In accordance to the protocol and the safety of field personnel, the Jaguar that was in the leg hold snare was sedated. It was determined to be an old Jaguar, and that it was processed in accordance to the handling protocol, and a satellite tracking collar was placed upon the animal. Upon exiting the field, which took 4 to 5 hours because they were in a remote location, the biologists who processed the animal were able to finally call out, notify people in the department, and they were able to transmit photographs for the identification of the animal. I think it's important to point out that initially when that animal was captured, we didn't know if this was Macho B, Macho A, or a new Jaguar that had entered into the area. It was a day before we were able to confirm that this animal was indeed Macho B, which was an animal that we had tracked for the past 13 years, who was first photographed in 1996 by a lion hunter at the estimated age of 2 to 3 years, which placed this animal at the age of 15 or 16. And we soon discovered that this was the oldest Jaguar ever handled for research purposes. The tracking collar placed upon this animal was a collar that was developed by North Star Technologies. It weighed approximately 1.8 pounds, which was less than 2% of the animal's weight. It had GPS capabilities that allowed us to receive readings from the animal every 3 hours. It would also tell us if that animal was moving or stationary. In the GPS capabilities, it would also tell us when that animal had crossed the border. Initially, we were going to place a mortality beacon on that collar, but learned that the means by which we'd have to do that was VHF. There's different wavelengths. And because of the security and concern with somebody being able to hack into that frequency, it was determined not to place that VHF beacon on the collar. After about a week, I should mention, after the release of the animal came out of sedation. It took approximately about 6 hours, and it walked off under its own accord. From satellite readings, that animal traveled approximately 3 miles from the site of capture. Over the next week, we were able to follow the animal and determine that it was foraging, moving around in a remote location southwest of Tucson. But after about 3 days after that, so about 10 days, we noticed that there was a reduced movement pattern of this animal. And so we started discussing what could possibly be the means by this. Just because an animal's not moving doesn't necessarily mean that's in distress. One of the things that we're discussing is perhaps this animal had made a kill and was sitting on that kill and was feeding upon it. And so on February 26th, it was determined that a field team would go in on that weekend and try to get a visual of the animal, as well as the area in which it was hanging out or not moving. We hiked in. I was one of the members of that initial field team. We hiked in. It was approximately about a 4-hour hike. Found tracks within that canyon and a bedding area where the animal had laid up. But you could tell from the tracks within the ground and the prints that this animal was having trouble moving. It was moving very slow. It would rest more often than what we had seen other animals similar to it, like mountain lions. And so it was determined that we needed to obtain additional GPS locations so we could get a visual of the animal. On Sunday, March 1st, a second team went in, accompanied by a veterinarian, wildlife veterinarian, and were able to obtain a visual on the Jaguar. The Jaguar, upon realizing that there's a human presence, started to try to walk away. He was walking very erratic and very slow, and so it was the determination of the veterinarian on staff at the time in the field was that it would be in our interest to tranquilize the animal again to do an evaluation. Unfortunately, the dart did not, he was unable to hit the animal with the dart, and the animal ran off. Because of communication issues within the canyon, they were unable to get an additional GPS location. So at that time they decided to hike out and call for additional resources. That was approximately 1 p.m. on Sunday. So from 1 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next morning, there was a monumental effort that was initiated with our partners on the Jaguar conservation team to mobilize a small army of individuals to go out to quickly capture this animal. And at 8 a.m. that field team was assembled, and upon receiving the GPS reading at 11 a.m., the team was given the green light to go and capture the animal. We had a helicopter on site. The helicopter flew the darting team within 250 yards of where the animal was laying up. The helicopter returned and flew up a set of hounds to be able to assist us with sniffing out the jaguar in case he was darted and ran off. This is very dense habitat. And within 57 minutes of deployment, we had captured Macho B. He was darted at 11:57 a.m., at which time the animal was carried to the helicopter. He was stabilized. Fluids started right away. They flew him down to the staging area where they gave him more fluids, stabilized him, and flew him to Tucson where they landed, refueled, also gave him some more fluids, and then flew him to the Papico National Guard facility a few blocks from the Phoenix Zoo, at which point myself and Dr. Dean Rice met the helicopter, transported the animal to the Phoenix Zoo. It was at the Phoenix Zoo that the readings were taken. There were x-rays that were taken. The blood was drawn for analysis. And it was at that point that it was determined that the animal was in severe and unrecoverable kidney failure. In consultation with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Phoenix Zoo, it was determined that it would be in the best interest of this animal to euthanize it. And approximately 5:15, the animal was euthanized. So that was the events that that included Macho B from approximately February 18th to March 2nd. A few things that I'd like to again emphasize is we did not set out to capture this animal. This was an incidental capture. This was a wild animal, and in order to release it from the snare, this animal had to be tranquilized. The animal was not identified as Macho B until a full day after the capture. The protocols for the capture and sedation and handling were protocols that were developed with Jaguar experts and are being used around the world. The administration of these drugs were necessary not only for the health and safety of the animal, but for the personnel in the field. There is no physical evaluation that can be conducted in the field to determine that an animal is in severe kidney failure unless it's almost at the very end of that disease. And so there would have been no way that the field crew would have been able to determine that this animal was in kidney failure at the time of capture. In closing, while the death of Macho B is a sad event, this Jaguar presented a unique opportunity to provide some of the insights into conserving these large predators on our landscapes. In the end, what we're talking about is wildlife conservation. Identifying those open areas, connecting those habitats necessary for maintaining wild populations. Thank you.
Next, as I stated before, next we'll have a statement from Dr. Dean Rice, who's the Executive Vice President of the Phoenix Zoo and the veterinarian who was involved with the treatment of Macho B and the necropsy. Dr. Rice.
Well, actually, thank you. My statement's pretty much made by Bill just now. Our involvement came, the Phoenix Zoo received a call Monday morning that the Arizona Game and Fish had a Jaguar and needed medical attention. So we got the logistics. They were going to fly it up in a helicopter to the National Guard heliport, which is right down the street from us, which made it convenient. So when he arrived, he'd already had IV fluids going to him and was intubated with an endotracheal tube and on a portable gas anesthetic machine. So at that time, we picked him up at the heliport, put him in a crate, open crate, brought him over to the zoo hospital where we administered fluids in a real fast pace, pulled some blood immediately to run it in-house to find out. At that time, we didn't have a diagnosis exactly what was going on with him. And then we took some x-rays, just doing a whole body scan to find out what was going on. When the blood report came back within about 30 minutes, the two values that normally contribute to evaluation of kidney values in any species of animal or person, that's one called a BUN, which is blood urea nitrogen. That's below 30 as an average figure for most species, and the machine goes to 180, so it's greater than 180. And then second one is a value called creatinine, which tells you chronic kidney function, and basically it's just a filtering. The kidney little filters, and when they don't filter, they get toxic elements in the blood. The creatinine should be below 2.5, and his was 15.2. So they weren't just elevated values, they were off the scale values. And the only treatment for kidney failure or aggressive fluids, and he'd already had 2 liters of fluids. We administered another 3 liters of fluids while we had him, but the big question is how are you going to maintain an animal on fluids? It's tough to do it, and when they're that far gone, those kidneys are irreversible. They're not going to come back. So unfortunately, our role was at the end, we were able to obtain a diagnosis, and it wasn't a good one. We couldn't fix the problem, and that was sad for everybody, but at least we had a diagnosis for him and which direction we could go, and the treatment options are pretty narrow. So that's why we went into consultation with what's the best care for the animal, and the best care for the animal at that point in time was let him not suffer. So that's the Phoenix Zoo's role. After that, we did a necropsy, which is the animal version of autopsy. I always like to tell that story that autopsy in Latin means viewing oneself. Unless that animal looks exactly like you, you can't call it an autopsy. It's a necropsy. So we did that. The necropsy was pretty uneventful. Nothing, we call it a gross, which means what you can see with your naked eye. Gross necropsy was pretty much normal for an older cat. We took tissue samples of virtually everything, which was standard procedure. In the zoo world, anything that dies, we automatically do a necropsy and send off histopathology to see if we can learn and find out what happened to this animal. So from that information, we hope to find out, sort of a timeline, how long these kidneys have been bad. My estimation is probably been bad for several weeks or months. And then we'll see there may be some other things that were not apparent grossly that we'll find on the lab reports too. So that generally takes 2 to 3 weeks. So we FedExed it down Tuesday, hope we'll have some results within 2 or 3 weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. And the final statement we have this morning is from Arizona Game and Fish Chairman Bob Hernbrod. Bob?
Thank you. Thank you for coming. My name is Bob Hernbrod, and I'm the chairman of the Arizona Game and Fish Commission, and I live here in Tucson. I want to take the opportunity to say in the strongest possible terms the wildlife management efforts that have occurred during the 2+ weeks involving Macho B was absolutely needed and appropriate. With ever-increasing impacts on our natural resources, there is a great need for sound stewardship and conservation of our state's wildlife. Good wildlife management must be based on solid biological information, and wildlife research plays a critical role in that. Gathering and studying this information helps to provide a better understanding of the needs of wildlife and the habitats where they live. Without a doubt, the effort expended to study Macho B for more than a decade has resulted in unlocking some of the mysteries that will certainly help the future of jaguars in Arizona. Critics may question the need for research and have questioned the professionalism and the integrity of the wildlife biologists from the partnering agencies. These critics are wrong. They're wrong. The credibility, the quality, the competency, the knowledge, and the sincerity of these men and women is second to none. The professional men and women who have tirelessly worked to conserve jaguars and all the state's wildlife do so with the highest level of passion and compassion. The Arizona Game and Fish Commission salutes them. We are all saddened by the loss of Macho B, but we intend to continue the work and learn a great deal more about him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can entertain questions if you have questions for any of the panelists at this time.
A question for the doctor. Would you mind standing up one more time, please? As Bill put it, and it cleared things up considerably for me. Once that animal was captured, there's very little you can do at that point in terms of releasing it, because you're going to have to sedate it first. You'd have to tranquilize it. An animal that age, is there any way that led to the demise of the animal, or are we already looking at a pre-existing condition that the trauma of a tranquilizer and this sort of honing device could impose upon it?
Well, my opinion would be that kidney failure problem is pre-existing, and it's just that old of an animal and as high those values were. So I would say any stress is going to maybe shorten the timeline, but it's not going to cause it or really aggravate it. It's just going to, he can't compensate like he normally would a younger animal.
And at the time that you originally found him, he appeared strong, relatively virile. I mean, he looked older, but he looked as any 16-year-old jaguar should look at that point. Is that correct?
Well, again, I'd like to emphasize, at the time of capture, we didn't know who he was.
So you didn't know how old he was then?
We didn't know how old he was. It wasn't until a day later that we were able to, through spot identification with our library of pictures, we're able to determine that it was indeed Macho B. So at the time, the personnel in the field just recognized this as a jaguar of old age. And so we didn't know at the time it was 16 years of age.
This is sort of a philosophical question, but just in lieu of everything that you guys have done over the last month, is there anything you would have done differently?
Absolutely not.
And for the naysayers out there, the critics, some of the people who are talking about lawsuits and so forth, what do you say to them? Because obviously you all have the same idea of conservation in mind.
Well, and that's the I guess the sad issue in this situation, because what we all are working towards is the conservation and the preservation of open space and the landscapes to allow these large carnivores to exist. We were hoping that through this research project on lions and bears that we'd be able to add a little bit of information in regards to jaguars on the landscape. Unfortunately, we won't be able to include very much information. But as Commissioner Hermbroad pointed out, in order to obtain this information, we have to be able to efficiently and effectively be able to monitor these animals. Radio collars is a technique, wildlife technique, that has been used safely for years. Millions of animals have been tranquilized as a result of having to do these studies. And hopefully people will realize that we did not go out and attend for this animal to be captured, and that we were working in the best interest of the publics of Arizona and the United States to try to obtain information that would help us make sound management decisions.
Thank you.
Tony?
This question is for Dr. Rice or for Bill or for anyone else there. I've heard, I don't know who's best able to answer this question. Some of the environmentalists were floating around a phrase called capture myopathy, like a trauma that stems from capture of an animal. Is there some way, and I know you've said that the stress of some of this could have contributed to it, is there some way to have examined or to examine the animal to determine if that was a major factor in its going downhill as quickly as it did?
Working in the zoo world, capture myopathy is a daily event, especially in hoofstock like antelopes and some of these real fragile little guys. Does not cause renal failure. This cat had renal failure. Capture myopathy is a totally different syndrome. It's an acute syndrome and it's a deadly syndrome, but that was not the case here.
Bill, you mentioned that you didn't know the age of it for 24 hours, is that correct? You didn't realize it was old for 24 hours?
We didn't know the identification of the animal for 24 hours. Upon tranquilizing the animal in the field, the biologist, once the animal was sedated, evaluated the animal and determined that it was an older animal. On the data sheets, we have cubs, young of the year, 1 to 2. We estimate the age. On the data sheet for this particular capture, it was 8+.
On the day, it was what? Oh.
8+.
And this was, what data sheet are you talking about?
The capture data sheet.
Okay, that's something that they compile, you mean?
Yes, in the field when we handle an animal, we have what is called the capture sheet, and so you record the temperatures of the animal as you're processing it. That's when you take the weight, any observations. This is when the animal was weighed and determined to be 118 pounds. And so all this is recorded through the handling of the animal. They had at least 4 temperature recordings for this animal while it was being processed, and the amount of time from the point of darting it until the animal started to regain consciousness and movement.
How did they determine that it was, what did you say, older, old? How did they determine that?
They look at the wear of various body parts, such as the claws on the animal, the teeth, just the general condition of the animal, and it's a science. It's an art. I mean, some people look at animals and say it's 3 years old, and some will say it's 5 years old, and ultimately, that's why we work in ranges in the field and not exacts. We wouldn't make good lawyers, that's for sure.
I understand. Well, can you tell me a little bit about the teeth, the claws, the body parts that provided clues as to the age? Anything specific, something a little more flesh out a bit?
Yeah, the claws were worn. They weren't pointed as a younger animal would have. They were more blunted. The same with the teeth. The teeth were, there was staining on the teeth. They weren't as pointed as a younger animal would have. The animal appeared to have various scarring around and on its body, which is indicative of an older animal compared to a younger animal, which tells you that it had been around for a while.
Were the teeth broken or damaged in any way?
There was, let's see, the upper left tooth was broken and broken off, and then the lower left was partially broken. There was missing teeth in the front, a substantial scarring or staining on the teeth.
with the claws, was there any similar kind of damage to the claws?
No, it had all of its claws present, just they were pretty worn out.
Were they still effective in the
Oh,
wild?
yeah.
Could they still puncture somebody?
Yes, they could have.
Okay.
I wouldn't have gone up to him to try to let him out without it being tranquilized, that's for sure.
Right, I wasn't suggesting that. Do you, oh, by the way, what's the maximum lifespan of a Jaguar? Does anybody know in general what that is?
20 years in captivity.
Captivity, about 21, I think is the oldest captivity.
21. Where was that, Dr. Lewis?
I don't remember, we had ours last year at 19 at Phoenix Zoo.
Dr. Rice, is it your professional opinion this animal would still be alive today or dead in the wild had it not been snared?
It was gonna die in the wild in a matter of time. I don't know what that time could be, it might be weeks. They're amazing.
Within the next couple of months, for sure.
I guess it was 19, 20. Did any thought, once you determined it was old, the claws wearing, the teeth broken, whatever, was there any thought, was any question in the minds of the researchers on the field as to whether putting a collar on it would be an appropriate thing to do, or was it felt that that was totally benign under any circumstance?
No, I mean, they evaluated the animal, and that is part of the evaluation of the health of the animal. The animal appeared to be healthy, a healthy animal, and that placing a collar upon that animal was appropriate.
Okay. All right, good. Another thing, Bill, is I wonder if you could just take a few minutes, a couple minutes, whatever, I want to do it succinctly, as to how you selected the site, and what led you to this area to set up this lion and bear project.
I do not know the details. That's a different, it's our research branch of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Reading the study proposal, part of the purpose of this study was to determine the connectivity and movement of the large carnivores in our, southern Sky Islands. And so this area that has been trapped is areas within those Sky Islands, and there's other areas that have been trapped as well.
Do you know offhand how close this trapping area was to areas where Childs and McCain had photographed the Macho bee in the past?
It was in the same areas that Macho bee has frequented over the last 13 years. Macho bee had a minimum home range estimate, I believe it was 1,153 square kilometers. Had a huge home range, and he could have been at any one of those locations that he had been photographed at any given time. He was recorded in the past by using the cameras, having moved 30 miles in one day, photographed one day at a camera along the Mexican border, and less than 24 hours later he was photographed 30 miles away. And we know this because the pictures are date stamped and time stamped.
Oh, excuse my emotion, but that's interesting. So was this capture site that had been set up, was it within the home range?
Yes.
Okay, and you said this site, the selection of this site was done through the work of the research department?
Yes, that is correct.
Do you have any contacts that would be worthwhile for us to call if we wanted to ask about that?
Chaucer O'Brien is the research branch chief.
Did they make the decision on this, or was the decision made ultimately by the director
For
where to do this research?
I don't know. You'd have to ask that question of Chaucer.
All right, that's fine. That's all my questions for you now.
Okay.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Are there questions for any of the other gentlemen at this time? Is there anything that
You'd like to add, that either, any of you that you think may have been missed or relevant?
Well, I'd just say one thing, I was
Yeah.
misquoted at a local paper yesterday that said that the stress and the sedation most likely killed the cat, and I'd like to clarify that. You know, that this cat had to be sedated. He had, in my estimation, prior kidney damage, but that was a misquote for me. I did not say that the stress.
I thought it said that it contributed to the kidney failure.
No, I mean, the thing is that might make it worse, but that didn't kill him. It said in one article I read that killed the cat, and that did not kill the cat.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Steve Spangle and Dr. Wright.
Oh, I do have another question that's more
Okay.
general. Will this incident cause the service, Game and Fish, anybody, to reevaluate their methods of capture, their philosophy of capture, anything about that entire issue? Because I have heard that from some of the environmentalists saying, do we need to take a second look now about how you do this?
The answer to that question is yes, Tony. 2 days after the capture of Macho B, the capture protocol was being evaluated, begin the process for reevaluation. The reason for that is, again, while this capture protocol is used around the world, this was the first time it was used on an animal on the northern extremes of its range. And so we wanted to review the data sheets and so forth to see if it does need tweaking for this area of the animal's range. That will be done through the Jaguar Conservation Team in consultation with the Jaguar Scientific Advisory Group.
What about in terms of since the animal died and all that, is that going to cause any additional look at it, or is it just going to be that, primarily going to be that tweaking?
You know, all the information will be provided to the Scientific Advisory Group, and they will make a recommendation if necessary. Got to remember that this animal died of kidney failure.
I'll say, Tony, that we, this capture and handling protocol is based on the best science by the experts who do this kind of work, and but we welcome others' input if they have ideas on how this process may be made safer. But again, as you just said, this was not, it wasn't the capture that resulted in the death of the animal. But the public's welcome to participate.
All right. Steve Spangle, Dr. Rice, Bill Spangle, and Commissioner Herbrod. Thank you. I hope this was helpful to those of you that are in the news business.